Chairman, I have to say I think the National Ambulance Service are doing a phenomenal job, considering that they've one hand tied behind their backs in relation to resources. There's three times as many ambulances in Northern Ireland as there are here in the Republic of Ireland, and we're trying to compete on a level playing pitch, which is impossible. Now, Ms McGuinness, in her initial contribution, said the response times are improving, and they are improving. But the latest available figures in the West is that 45% of life-threatening incidents are responded to within that 19 minutes. That's 12 months old. As you know, for the last 6 months, I've been looking for current figures, and the only thing I've got in the last 6 months is a link to the HSE website. So it'd be nice if we could have the current figures, because, as you know, we have 3 ambulance black spots in the west of Ireland, and it was identified back in 2001 by the Western Health Board, and at long last we have here today a commitment now to operate them on a 24/7 basis. If I could clarify, in the HSE service plan, there's €700,000 set aside to operate at these 3 stations. Now, Minister Lynch in the Dáil told us it would take €1.8 million to provide a 24/7 operation in the 3 stations. So is the money being made available now to provide that on a 24/7 basis without the removal of resources from the other surrounding stations? And why has it taken so long to resource that? We've had the Western Health Board report, we had an independent review in 2005 of the ambulance services in the West, nothing was done in relation to that. There was a whistleblowers report given to you last year, given to the Minister this year, listing 216 incidents and near misses in a 6-month period in County Roscommon, and yet we have to wait until HIQA publishes a report before anything can happen. The final question I want to ask is in relation to this capacity review. It seems to me now that you're throwing in the towel as far as rural Ireland is concerned. You're comparing the situation here in the Republic of Ireland with that in the UK, in England. And to me, it's a whitewash if that's what you're doing in relation to the comparisons. For example, if you look at Scotland, in 2012-2013, their 8-minute response times, 74.7% of responses were within that 8-minute target, and we're saying that we cannot achieve that here. In Northern Ireland, just across the border, their target is within the 8-minute response time, 72.5%, and not less than 65% in any area. You're saying that at best, with putting the resources in, you can only do it in 64% of the time. Maybe it might be worthwhile looking to see what they're doing in Northern Ireland, see what they're doing in Scotland, rather than in England, because these delays are lives lost, and that's the reality of it. And I think it's also important to point out, Chairman, that the HSE as of yet is still not publishing the within 8-minute response times for first responders. So we're here, we don't even know what is happening on the ground at the moment. We don't have those figures. And when are we actually going to start seeing some real response times in relation to first responders landing at the scene of the incident and carrying out the type of work that we know that our ambulance service can do? Thank you.
Deputy Naughten has, in the first instance, I'd like to say the purpose of the ambulance service is try to respond to as many calls as it can in as quickest time as possibly can, and the ambulance services staff working on the front line pride themselves for trying to do that. They're a hugely committed and dedicated workforce. They work very hard, and indeed, they come to the rescue of patients when they are at their most vulnerable. This is the first thing I'd like to say. In terms of the 8 minutes response times, the reason that hasn't been published is, firstly, at the moment, we don't have the information infrastructure to do it in a safe way. Notwithstanding that, we're certainly there to try to do it. The purpose of the capacity review was not for us to throw our hands in the air and say this can't be done. It was to see actually how can we do this? How can we actually reach services, particularly in areas in the West, where there have been gaps and black spots in as quick a time as possible. And that's why we had the international capacity review. They didn't just compare the Irish service to England, they compared it to Scotland, to UK, they compared it to Wales, they compared it to Australia, New Zealand. So they took on a whole international research in relation to the comparatives, which is why actually it's taken a period longer than we would have liked and indeed would have expected.
Has that piece been reported back in? Because I know in your remarks you referenced England.
I did.
But we haven't got the Scottish, Welsh piece yet?
That will be available when we have the full capacity review. What you have available to the committee is what I have, which is the executive summary. But when we have the full report, you'll be able to see it in its entirety. But I did want to show what we had available to us at that time. Importantly, though, in relation to the 8-minute response times, we met with HICWA the day before the publication of the report. As you know, in 2010, HICWA had set the target of 75%. That was the target to be achieved in the 8 minutes. That now isn't the target that's to be set. What's required, based on the information available, is that for categories of minor urban, rural and for towns, we've to set a response time, a very stretched target of what's achievable, and then set about putting in place a stretched trajectory as to how we continue to improve over a period of time, because there is a recognition that the 75% may not be achievable in particular rural areas. The purpose, though, of the capacity review as well was to say what resource might be needed in order to make that more achievable. Where we are actually not as good as we should be, and we've recognised that ourselves, is in relation to community first responders. We've only 105 community first responders in place. We've met with Community First Responders Ireland in order to widen that scope. What the capacity review will do, it will inform us as to where best we should be targeting community first responder schemes. So we'll have that information available at the end of December with a view to putting an implementation plan in place. We do intend to publish the 7-minute 59, but we need to get something that divides it between rural and urban, and to set a target that's actually deliverable and achievable, because if we set a 75% target, it's just not going to be deliverable or achievable within the current resource that we have at the moment. In terms of Deputy O'Dowd, sorry.
The ambulance stations, the 1.8 million.
Yes. In relation to the ambulance stations, and I know, Deputy, that you said, you know, is it only when HICWA reported that we actually responded to this? The answer to that is no. Our estimate process starts well in advance. We had highlighted as one of the most significant priorities was the staffing of Loughlin, Mulranny and Tuam. In fact, last year, or this year, in 2014, we had Loughlin in our capital plan. That will be ready by the end of the year. The funding is available, and in fact those posts have job offers, as I understand, have gone out I think as late as today in relation to the staffing of that, so we can get the staff in or offer them places at the earliest opportunity to address those deficits. So it was part of a planned arrangement. We'd looked for funding previously. The funding is now available to us, and we're glad that
but
it is.
It's going to be a new staffing there. We're not taking resource from somewhere else.
Loughlin is different, so Mr Dunn might comment in relation to Loughlin, but with regard to Mulranny and Tuam, that's new staff that will be going into Mulranny and Tuam.
And then in the context of the Lightfoot report, just kind of linked to what Deputy Naughten was, in terms of the operational changes you've made in terms of the deployment and redeployment points for new ambulance stations, is there any further plans to change that in light of this?
When we see that's only available.
I know that, yeah.
That's just available on the 14th of November. So, and that's the executive summary is there that's available. When we have the full report, we certainly will be looking to see, you know, where should the stations be and where are the black spots that we need. Because, as I said earlier, the 100 stations are based. That's a number of years ago since we were based there. Populations have changed. You know, there's been movement of various communities over various pockets throughout the country. So certainly we'll be looking to see where is the best place for the dynamic deployment that will serve the population and the public as best as we can. Do you want to maybe comment in relation to Loughlin?
Okay, yes, thanks. Deputy Naughten, how are you? Yeah, in relation to the West in general, I mean, the West was prioritised this year to be able to ensure that we can staff appropriate stations, and also we're looking at what we call the on-call system that's still in some parts of the West available, and we've prioritised both the on-call and the stations in Tuam and Mulranny for first off prioritisation. In relation to Loughlin, what we're looking at there is redeployment of staff from existing cohorts of staff within these stations that surround Loughlin to be able to give us an appropriate 24-hour cover in that area.
So no new resource or additional resource going in there?
Not at the moment, no, that's not the plan. The plan is to staff the other two first initially and then eliminate the on-call as well.